Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. Today we're going to revert back to talking about specific locations that will improve the number of fish that you can catch, increase the number of bites, and hopefully take you away from wasting time in unproductive areas and put you around the fish. I think a lot of you guys know that I've grown up fishing rivers, whether they're big rivers like the Mississippi and Wisconsin rivers, or small streams where maybe you can't get your big boat down them. Maybe you're wading them. Maybe you take a kayak trip. Those types of small streams are something that I've spent a ton of time fishing as well. And honestly, that's one of my favorite ways to fish because a lot of times you get untouched fish. You get fish that are so unpressured and you're only fishing in a couple of feet of water that you get some amazing fights because the fish are just very aerial and acrobatic because of the fact that they don't have anywhere else to go but up for the most part. So it's really a fun way to fish, especially during those hot summer days. And I've gotten a lot of feedback from you guys requesting me to talk more about how to target bass in small streams and small rivers. So that's what I want to do today. I want to talk about some of the high percentage places that you can catch more fish in these small streams because the reality is a lot of times you could hit stretches of these streams and rivers that are not very productive. They don't have the right characteristics to draw the fish to them. So that's one of the biggest things. If you take a float trip, it's funny how often you may take a 5 mile float trip and there'll be like two sections of that float trip that are not productive. And then all of a sudden you hit a stretch that is just really a good stretch. And that's because that stretch has the characteristics that the fish are looking for. They probably have a little bit more depth to them, maybe a little bit more current to them, probably more bait fish, more areas for them to hide. They need those things to draw them to it. So don't waste your time in those unproductive areas. So that's why I want to do this video. And before I do get into that, I do want to remind you, if you're looking for a little bit of help on your local lakes, check out the lake breakdowns that I do at fishthemoment.com. The link is in the video description. Myself, Randy Blockett, Johnny Schultz, we have done hundreds of lake breakdowns on lakes across the country. So chances are you have one there. And if not, you can request me to do a breakdown on whatever lake or river that you want me to do. So check all that out. All right, guys. So the first and probably most important piece of structure that you can find in these smaller rivers is an outside bend. An outside bend is something that will garner more current and usually have more depth. Because you have more depth and because you have more current, a lot of times on that bend you'll have a cut bank, and a cut bank is where the fish can actually get underneath the bank because the water and the current flow has washed away the land and dirt that is under like a lot of the roots or tall grass that are on those channel swings. But here's a couple of points I want to make about outside bends. Just because you have an outside bend doesn't necessarily mean that the whole bend is going to be good. The best portions on the outside bend are going to be the top portion, so where the current hits that bend first, and then where the current leaves that bend. Those are your two most high percentage spots on an outside bend. The reality is those are the areas where the current is going to be strongest. So when it hits first that corner or the first part of the bend, the current gets funneled and therefore picks up speed. And when it comes off that bend, it's almost like a slingshot coming off and being shot down the river. So those are your two high percentage spots. But you're going to be looking for any sort of cut bank, any little bit of extra depth. A lot of times on an outside bend, you may only have the extra depth right up against the bank. You may not have that much extra depth out in the middle of the channel itself. So you may, just because you're on a bend means you can't necessarily be thrown into the middle. You may actually want to be fishing. If you're fishing from shore, you want to be fishing where your feet are if you're standing on the outside bend itself. But generally on an outside bend, you get more current, more depth. You get some laydown trees or some undercut banks. Those are areas that the fish like to stay in. Very simple places, probably the easiest places to pick out just for those characteristics, but they almost always hold fish. So the next spot we're going to move on to is a sand drop. Sand drops are something that often go overlooked by a lot of novice anglers. Really, what they are is you get sand deposits from current flow, and then you'll hit a point where the sand deposit ends, and you get a quick drop off. That drop may only be a couple of feet of water. You may go from 6 inches of water on top of the sand drop to 2 feet of water behind it. But what that does is it creates a fantastic ambush place for a bass to wait. It doesn't matter what species of bass we're talking about. They all will use all of the places I'm going to mention. With the sand drop, the bass will sit right behind it and they're waiting for food to come over the top of them. So because a lot of times your sand drops are in really pretty shallow water, or the tops of them are, you're talking about top water baits coming over the top of that lip. Yeah, flukes are great baits. Sometimes even like a square bill can be really good if it's really clean sand and you're not going to pick up any sort of bottom moss. But as soon as you come over that lip, that's where the fish are going to be. If your bait is brought back more than 10 feet past that sand lip, chances are you're probably not going to catch a fish and you can make another cast. The thing with the sand drop is you get very small windows. Like I said, you can throw it way up on top of the sand lip, but generally they're not going to be there. They're generally going to be in that 10 or 15-foot window right around the ledge of the edge of that sand lip. But they are super high percentage areas. They work great all over the country, and they often go overlooked because people don't recognize sand as a potential place to hold fish. The next up, we've got laydowns. And laydowns really are, again, pretty classic cover, but I want to point something out here. A laydown on an outside bend is a great piece of structure. I think we're all aware of that. I want to point out laydowns like in this example where you see a handful of laydowns on a long straightaway of super shallow stretch of river. This stretch of river specifically is only about 2 feet deep. A lot of people would bypass this stretch because there isn't any good prime area. It's a long straightaway. There's no cut banks. It's just straight sand, and it's got a couple of laydowns. Well, the key to this laydown is, or the laydowns that I've got circled, is you've got small dugout trenches right around that wood. So the wood is stuck on the bottom and the current goes by it and it literally digs trenches out. So you may only be in 1.5 feet of water, but if you went and stood right next to that laydown, like literally within a couple of feet of that laydown, there's probably a trench that's dug out around it that may be 2.5 or 3 feet deep. That's where the fish are going to stand. So it's a very high percentage spot on a low percentage stretch of bank. So that the handful of fish that are using that long straightaway are going to be keyed in on those few little deep holes that are around your laydowns and your other things that could be creating some sort of deeper water. So you don't ever want to overlook a laydown. If it's on a high percentage spot like an outside bend, you definitely want to fish it. But if you've got a crummy, shallow stretch of sand and gravel that looks like nothing and there's one piece of wood there, that one piece of wood has probably got a little deeper water around it, and I'll guarantee you that there's probably a fish holding on it as well. So don't overlook the pieces of wood that are on the low percentage stretches as well. The last one here is something that, again, I think can go overlooked unless it's something you've kind of been brought up around. And I want to talk about like rock eddies and riffles. So a rock eddy is specifically the slack water that's behind a big rock, right? And in a stretch like a river like this, you've got a ton of rocks. It's all rock, but you've got some rocks that are higher up than others that come to the surface, and therefore you get a really nice eddy behind that rock. Very much a high percentage spot. It's something that the fish will sit behind because you have slack water and they let the current rage around them. So it's something that, again, is well, most of us are familiar with a rock eddy. A lot of us, though, are not as familiar with a riffle. So a riffle is where you get a high spot of rock or gravel, and then you get the current comes over it, and usually what happens is it's similar to a sand drop. You get a little deeper water behind it that's got an eddy or slack water. A lot of times those rock riffles will funnel water around it, like you can see in the left side of this picture, where you can see the current is being pushed around that shallow rock riffle and that island. So not only do you have an eddy, you get really good current seams, and those current seams can be really high percentage areas. A spot like this, A riffle can be a number spot. You can catch multiple fish that are using a current seam coming off of a riffle versus a single rock eddy, which generally is not going to hold more than a couple of fish. Usually it's a one fish spot. So it's something that you want to recognize, that if you're in a shallow rocky river, you're looking for your riffles, you're looking for a single rock that's creating an eddy, and a lot of times you're looking for a ledge. You know, there's a lot of rivers out east, like the New River, where you get these rock ledges, you know, where you get a small drop in water level. But those edges, those ledges on those drops are where a lot of the fish are holding, because it creates a great current break and a great place for the fish to feed. But I assure you guys, these are your top targets to fish in small streams and rivers. If you fish them, whether it's from a kayak, from shore, wading them, or even in a boat, these are the things you're going to want to concentrate on. Cut out the dead water, concentrate on these. You will increase the number of fish that you're catching. And it's something I love to do, especially in the summer months. I'm going to be getting out and doing some of these. Hopefully I'll get some video footage for you guys. And I can't wait to hit some of them. So thanks for watching. I appreciate all the support from you guys. Let me know if you've got suggestions on videos that you want to talk about. If you enjoyed this one, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned. Another video coming out tomorrow.